Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode 306 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce you to Jody. Jody is Lueza's mom. Jody has a long history of working as an actor on Broadway, but nothing could have prepared her for the role that she took on the day Lueza was born. After a completely normal and uneventful pregnancy, Lueza was born and had significant birth complications leading to multiple medical problems. It was really interesting to hear her perspective as a mom navigating through the medical system in the way that she had to do. She showed so much appreciation to the medical teams who helped take care of Lueza over the years, and it was really refreshing to hear about doctors and nurses who did things right. I also want to take a minute and talk about this week's sponsor. So this week's sponsor is Dana. Dana sponsored this episode in memory of her son, Brogan. Actually, Dana gives a monthly contribution of $10 a month. And a $10 a month contribution gives you one episode to dedicate per year. And moving forward, for Brogan, this will be at the end of May, closer to his birthday. But since we have passed that, we are going to dedicate this episode to Brogan today. So thank you, Dana, especially for your continued monthly contributions. That helps so much. So again, this episode in memory of Brogan. If you want to dedicate an episode of the Always Andy's Mom podcast to your child, you can do so by going to andysmom.com and clicking on the donate page. When you click on that page, you'll be given options of a one-time donation or monthly donations, and it will give little explanations as to how many episodes that can help to sponsor. So thank you so much for all of you who have done that. It's now 3 episodes in a row that have sponsors, so I'm super excited about that. Right now, just sit back and enjoy listening to Jody, Lueza's mom. Thank you so much, Jody, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yes, I am excited to hear all about your daughter, Lueza. So why don't you just start out by telling us a little bit about her?
I'm sure my story is similar with some stories, but it's probably less likely because her life on the day of her birth began in a really catastrophic way. It was a bad birth.
Because you had a normal pregnancy up until that point?
Yeah, I had a great pregnancy. I was very active. I was in a Broadway show 8 times a week up until maybe 5.5 months pregnant when they finally said, we're happy to have you here, but let us know when you're going because, they had to let the costumes out a bit.
Right, I would think so. Yes.
So at about 5.5 months, I thought, okay, I think I'm ready to go. Then I was off until literally 9 months to the day. I just happened to know when Lueza was conceived. And, I had no fear of childbirth. My mother had been very positive about birthing, her 4 children. And so it was, I think because had been an actor, dramatic things were interesting to me. So I'd think about birth like, well, how terrible, how painful is it? And what is it like? And women have been going through this for millennia. So I went into it with all of these, positive feelings. Unfortunately, bad things happened. Choices were made, the result of which was a birth that went wrong. And Lueza was very brain damaged during the birth. When she emerged, she needed to be intubated because she wasn't breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Her APGAR scores, which is what they do to every baby that's born. They look at the color, they look at the breathing, they look at the reflexes. And, so she was 0 when she came out. They intubated her. And then they had already called the emergency services on the floor where the neonatal intensive care unit is. Those people arrived. And within a few minutes, she was out of the room and gone to the emergency service people. It was the most horrific thing one could have ever not imagined. And my husband and I were then alone in a room, wondering, terrified. I mean, you were just terrified. You didn't know what had happened. You didn't want to talk. That's how her life started with us. She had a wonderful pregnancy, and then this catastrophe happened. And why did it happen? That's I don't think about really, because decisions were made and decisions, maybe at some point a doctor would have done a cesarean. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what happened is that at a certain point, the numbers went very bad. I remember the doctor saying, baby's not happy where she is. We need to get her out right now. And that's what happened. It was a nightmare. And I saw her at about maybe 2 a.m. because I had to wait. I finally had to get an epidural because they rushed. They did things that should have, not happened. And so the pain became to the level where it was too excruciating to almost breathe. So I did get an epidural, and then I had to wait for that to wear off. So we went to see her probably at, 2 a.m. in the NICU, where most of the babies there are, very, very tiny.
Yeah.
Tiny little preemies. And that's how her life started. So it was, it's like something opened and you entered a new world that you, of course, never thought you would be in. Like all of our group, all of the parents of, parents that have lost children, where you never thought you would be in this world. So that was her beginning. And she was in the hospital, I think, for 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
They were observing her. They were, doing various tests. And all I remember is that they said, oh, we did a CAT scan and we didn't find anything, of her brain. And we knew that she was having seizures right away, which is a very bad sign. But luckily I didn't know anything more than that's a bad thing. But I didn't, read up on it when I just got home, because I was in a kind of state of shock.
Yeah, I'm sure you were.
So, she was on phenobarbital, which is, people's dogs are on phenobarbital for seizures. And eventually we were told that, okay, she was able to nurse. She, was okay enough to nurse. And we took her home after 10 days. And they really didn't say anything. I'm sure now that I know everything I know about this birth, I'm sure the doctors were just thinking, this doesn't look good. But maybe they were also thinking, some babies have what look like terrible births. I don't know. It's one of the areas that I hardly go into, because it's a bad area for me, psychologically. But we were told, oh, you have a follow-up with a neurologist, and just to make sure everything's okay. And we, took her home on this beautiful day, somewhere around probably October 13th
So
or
what year
14th.
was this then?
This was 1994.
Yeah,
We
I
were
was gonna
living,
say, it was a
I'd
while
lived
ago.
most of my life in New York City, where I grew up. So this is a very, fancy New York City hospital. And we, this was on the east side of Manhattan. We had our little apartment on the west side, but because my parents lived walking distance from the hospital, but when we got out, before she got out, we just basically moved into their apartment. And my parents just opened the doors and helped us live in a way, because they were there. My mom would throw something together for dinner. We were spending most of the days up in the hospital in the NICU, holding Lueza and hoping for the best. And that's how it all started. And so we were thrust into a strange world where in the beginning, it's so great. I found it to be great. I didn't want any bad news. I couldn't tolerate any bad news. So I just magically people came out of the woodwork just saying, "Oh, don't worry. My baby had a terrible birth, or my baby had seizures." And all of those babies were fine. So it really helped me have hope in the beginning when I felt like it was like food. I had to have hope, because it took a long time to be ready little by little as you kind of saw this thing happen. That doesn't look good. This happened. That was bad. And, little by little, you start to realize something very bad happened. And she's not developing physically. She's not doing the milestones, she's having seizures again. She has to do a very strange, rare treatment of injections twice a day that my husband took over because I said, I can't do it. So we moved into New York Hospital for a few days for him to learn how to do that and to get some information about what might lay ahead, but it was all very vague. Yeah, and we stayed at my parents' for about 9 months.
Wow.
She started getting therapies through the state, through what was called an early intervention program. They, do assessments for your baby or your child. And, before these assessments or groups, I would say, I don't want to hear anything that's going to freak me. I don't, just, is there hope? Can she be okay? And it was great because they heard what I was saying and they took it in so that they didn't say, "It looks like your child is going to be severely disabled." Nobody said that. It wasn't that they were, lying, but they just listened to me and thought, what does it mean, okay? Maybe that's what they thought. Yes, she can be okay.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't want any specifics at that point. So that kind of kept me going, which was, she'll be okay. She's going to have therapy. She'll catch up.
Yeah.
So it went on for a long time.
Yeah. This is the thing. It's so hard to know. So
Yeah.
I'm a pediatrician. You don't know this about me, but I'm a
Oh, Mom.
pediatrician.
God, you're a pediatrician?
I am a pediatrician.
Oh, I love that.
I'm like, oh, she doesn't know this because this was not. So just so you all know, this was kind of arranged by someone else. So this is Jody and I's first time talking. So
Right.
I've been there. I've been in that. I've not been. I have to say, I was very fortunate in my 3 years of pediatric training and all my time in the NICU. I never was at one of those births that went like it was normal and then it just
Right.
wasn't, and it was really devastating. So I feel very fortunate that I didn't have to do that. But I had been to many preemie births and many when they were expected, when we kind of knew things were bad and they knew they had a bad heart and they knew we had all these things. So I would be there. But it was interesting to hear that perspective just now, even from you, because I really hadn't thought about the fact that I would be on that team that was there, that was in the room to get the first 2 APGARs, maybe the first 3, and then we're out of there. Right. And it's good for me to hear, I think, your perspective again, because it does make me think about it like, oh yeah. But I guess as a, pediatrician in training, it probably wasn't my job to have to worry about the mom, and I have to worry 100% about the baby at that point in time. Yeah. But still, it gives me time to think a little bit too about that side. And then of course you just really don't know what's going to happen with these kids. It's so incredibly variable.
Yeah.
You have kids that have these horrific APGAR scores that you think will never be able to do anything that do great. You have other kids. I have another kid that was a 32-week preemie. You would not think that would be a big deal. They actually accidentally ordered an ultrasound of the head because it should have been, as a 32-weeker, you didn't have to do that. If you were born before 32 weeks, you did. And then it found out that he had something very significant wrong with his brain that I didn't know. And now we're like, okay, we're just going to watch that and see how he develops. But I think they're right and you were right in that we don't know. And I remember I've very often said to families, I don't know. We're going to let
Yeah.
We're going to see what your child is going to become. I don't know. In your case, you didn't want to know. I've got other families that want to know,
Right.
and I can't tell them
Right.
because there's just no way to know.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. So
And especially back
important to
then,
hear
I
your-
think at that time, because I did my training in pediatrics from 2000 to 2003, so that's quite a bit later
Wow.
even than you. And then now it's insanely different again. It's
Mhm.
the protocols they have for these kids are amazing now. So, but anyway, that's a little bit of an aside, but I feel important to talk about. Yeah.
It's very interesting. I didn't know this about you.
No, I thought you have no idea about this.
And this is one of my things that I keep thinking about, but because I'm not good at pushing myself, I don't seem to make any headway with it. But I have this maybe fantasy, but when we spent a lot of time living at Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, which is part of Stanford Hospital out here
Mm-hmm.
in Palo Alto.
Yeah.
So I'd be living there for weeks at a time with Lueza as her health turned a bad corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working. I was, the pediatric residents were in and out, and they were learning from us because this is the world they were going into. Obviously, I'm trying to learn from them because this is when she was, 9 years old, 10 years old. And so I have this idea in my head. Wouldn't it be wonderful if I could be a resource for people that are going into pediatrics? Because so many of these kids are frequent flyers and they're at the hospital all the time. What does the parent know? What does the doctor know? How do you deal with these people? So this is my fantasy, which is to somehow connect with people that are going to be pediatricians
Mm-hmm.
and say, look, you can ask me anything. You can talk to me about death. You can talk to me about anything. This is my dream. So
Yes. Well, and that's very similar to you and I because obviously after losing Andy, I realized how totally unprepared I was in my training, really dealing with death and death of children and helping families. And so my husband and I now actually do speak to medical students, and we've done
really,
different grand rounds at a couple different institutions for their pediatrics programs, trying to help people know how to kind of help. What to do, because you're not taught at all.
Yeah.
And you end up sort of hopefully finding someone can be a mentor to you that does a good job with it, and maybe you can copy what they do. But if you don't, then how do you learn?
Right.
I don't know how you're supposed to learn because nobody teaches it. So that's something that my husband and I are working on quite a bit. And I know the feedback we've gotten has been really positive from people because they just don't get it. You just don't get trained on it. You don't know.
Right.
I didn't know. I had no idea. And then even hearing stuff from you today felt like, oh, and I hadn't thought about that part either. And those are the things that you kind of think about.
Wow.
But now I've, of course, spoken with hundreds of parents, and many of whom have had kids with long-term illnesses, and it does change your perspective, I think. More.
Yeah, we were so lucky. Because we'd usually go in through the emergency room, there was this hospitalist there who I just loved after I met her. And she had sort of been in touch with us a lot at the hospital. And one of the times she said to me, I would love to come to your home. I would love to see how Lueza lives. How do you do this? I said, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And she came to our home to see Lueza's room, what kind of a bed she sleeps in, so I got very attached to a bunch of different doctors. She was the hospitalist, but a bunch of them were residents. Yeah. And one of them, I just happened to know, can't even remember how I know this. He set up, his own practice now for years, and he's in Bend, Oregon. And I found, the name of the practice. I called them up. I said, hi, if I send Dr. Peoples' book at this address, will he get it? And she said, yeah, but what? And I said, well, here's the story. He helped take care of my daughter. I met him at 3 a.m. once in a hospital. And so I sent him the book. About 3 weeks later, I get the most beautiful letter from him
Mhm.
where I felt like my life, I can die now because everything kind of has worked out because he wrote me back and said, maybe you don't know this, but he said, I went into pediatrics because, of course, I wanted to work with children, but I also wanted to work with families. And he said, you and Louisa were my first family.
Oh,
I never knew that.
no.
I met him at 3 a.m. She went to the emergency room. We finally got to the room. And you know that this poor guy's been woken up probably in a hallway. He
Yeah.
comes into the room. He starts to do his intake. And at one point he said, wow, she's not on any medications. You guys must be doing something right. Well, that was it for me. I loved Dr. Peoples. And, then he was on another bunch of, residencies. So we didn't see him after a certain point.
No, because you go on different rotations,
Exactly.
and so you meet different families.
Yep.
And I have many families who I remember. The ones that you put in quotation marks or air quotes, the frequent flyers. Yes. I mean, those are the kids that I know. The ones that were going through their cancer treatments and needed to be coming in all the time, every few weeks for their inpatient chemotherapy or those are the kids those are the families that you really got to know. I mean, I tell a story a lot of times. I'm not going to tell this again here on the podcast, but I had a PICU family that I felt like this one, I just love this family. I just loved this family. And she died one night, and I came in the next day and she was gone. And I remember holding that mom with their her dead child between us, just crying. And I felt, until Andy died, I had always felt like that was the one time I had screwed up. I had really messed up, that I showed emotionality because I'm supposed to keep it together and I'm supposed to be professional. And she said to me that day, you're going to be a great general pediatrician. And I heard her in my mind say, you better do general pediatrics, honey, because you suck at this. And that's not what she meant.
Nah.
What she meant was, you're going to be a great pediatrician because you care.
Yes.
And you're showing that you care. And it was only after Andy died that I realized that. And I've tried to find her since then, and I've not been able to.
Wow. That's incredible.
Because I didn't know that. And I feel like and I tell that story every time I speak with pediatricians, and especially ones in training, about how it is okay to show that you're a human, and it is okay to show that you care. Yeah. Because really, that's what families want. They want someone taking care of their child who cares about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't care about, obviously, you don't want to be a weeping heap and have the mom have to comfort you. Okay? Yeah. That's too far. But if you show that you have care and compassion in your heart, and you really want the best for their child, that's who they're going to want to take care of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I did notice that in your book, that, you said a thank you at the end to the residents.
I listed a whole bunch of them.
You did. You did. And that meant a lot to me, because I don't think parents know how much those families mean to us. Like, I can picture them in my head 25 years later. I can picture them.
That's such an incredible story. Yeah. I think I've heard another doctor, I can't remember who, on a podcast, maybe it's Dr. Peter Attia, who does a huge podcast, but talking about this subject of the connection and how important it is for families, but also for certain doctors.
Yes, absolutely.
That's why they're there.
Absolutely. I don't think people understand that it really can go both ways. And I do want to talk about too, that well, first of all, let's talk a little bit more about Lueza, but I'm going to go into some other things in a bit. So let's talk a little bit more about Lueza and her personality. And because obviously we got a little sidetracked. You were at first 9 months kind of really very close to that hospital, but and then eventually you moved to California, but let's talk about her and her personality and just some of her loves and get to
Yeah.
know her a little bit.
Yeah. A major thing that happened early on was once she had to go through this really unpleasant hormonal, oh, you know all this stuff. She had to do ACTH for a month.
Uh-huh.
So, my husband had to do the injections twice a day. Once she got through that, which included almost no sleeping and a lot of screaming, and it was
Oh,
a
poor
nightmare.
thing.
Once that was over, I remember one day she just smiled, and the neurologist said at some point in his notes, "Great, Louisa has great social skills." And from then on, that was her path, which
Yeah.
included us on this path, which was she was happy.
Yeah.
She she could make eye contact, she could hear, she could see, she had joy, and that's why when I said that one day and I was all like, and I said, "Is she always gonna be lying down?" Meaning, is she not going to develop physically at all? And I was getting this kind of, very sad feeling, and my husband said, "She may be lying down, but she may be very happy." I mean, it's almost like from I don't know where, and that's what happened. She had a sense of humor. She loved us. She loved when her sister came along 2 years later. She was a great source of humor and joy. She just had so much, and at a certain point in the first maybe 2 years, at some point, we realized she has a yes and a no that are very, very clear.
Uh-huh.
So we could talk to her, and she'd be lying on her back, and we'd ask her questions. She did a very tiny shake of the head for no, and if it was something she wanted and we said, do you want this? Do you want this movie? Do you want" she could turn her head to the right and say, "I." And that it that was it. That
Yeah.
changed everything because then you have communication.
Right. And you know what she likes and what she doesn't
And you
like.
know
And
what she likes, and she, of course, has crying, laughing, everything else, and, you know, then you start to think, "Well, my God, what w how do we go to school? How does she do?" And another whatever we call it, kind of a miracle happened when I accidentally found out about this school out here called the Bridge School, which was started by Neil Young's wife, Peggy Young, and another parent and a speech language therapist. They said, "Wait a second, we need a special school," because Ben Young, their son, similarly very catastrophically disabled for I'm not sure what reason. They created this school, and I happened to read a piece of the New York Times at a bagel shop after I dropped Louisa off at preschool at United Cerebral Palsy in New York City, and it was describing this rock concert to benefit this special school, and they described how incredible it was. All these kids in wheelchairs on the stage right behind the musicians. So the audience is looking not only at the musicians, but all of these kids, and they mentioned their little communication devices they had on their wheelchairs. And I'm reading this thinking, they're describing Louisa. I
right.
didn't know where it was. I went home. I, called information for the Bridge School in California and was on the phone with the secretary of the school. And from then on, for a couple years, we sent her reports. We sent pertinent information, and then a spot opened up, and she got the spot. Boom, boom, boom. We ended up here.
And you moved to across the country to California.
Yeah. I mean, if the Bridge School had been in Grand Rapids, we would be in Grand Rapids. If the anywhere it had been, we would have gone there because it was designed for kids with pretty significant severe disabilities that could not speak. And it was all about educating them, trying to figure out could they use a communication device. Anyway, that's what got us out here.
I love that. That's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
beautiful.
yeah, Peggy Young was an amazing woman, amazing. And then they had these, this weekend concert every year, usually at the end of October. All of these incredible groups, everybody from Foo Fighters, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, they had the new upcoming artists like Jill Sobule. I mean, they had Tegan and Sarah, young upstart people. And then they had the old timer people, Tony Bennett. I mean, they had everybody and everybody in between.
That's awesome.
And you would, if your kid liked music, you'd be on the stage listening to those musicians. And it was amazing. And Louisa's younger sister started going to those concerts at age 4. I'd carry her on stage. We had our special passes. And now Dora is touring the world and the country as a singer-songwriter because
Oh.
that had a huge impact on her. And she was one of those musical kids that became her path at a certain point.
Well, and Louisa loved music too.
Louisa loved music. And
Mhm.
my husband, who is now my beloved ex-husband, we're very close. He made sure we had the complete Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals on, what was then DVDs. We had lots of music. And some music would make her sob. It was curious. We didn't know. I mean, some had a very sad sound. And okay, that's why. One of them was a song on this beautiful CD that an actress singer friend that I had worked with many years ago, Mimi Bissett, she put out this beautiful CD of Broadway lullabies. So she'd take songs that weren't necessarily lullabies, but the way she sang them, it would be something that you would want to play for your kids at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And one of those songs would make Louisa sob, so stop playing that. But she had her own unique personality, and she loved certain movies. She never liked animation until a certain point, and then she loved The Little Mermaid. She loved roller coasters, we realized. We went down to Disneyland, and Dora was terrified as we were starting to go in the Matterhorn ride. Luckily, there was a moment where we could say, stop, and I got out with Dora because it was too scary for her. And Louisa was, sitting on her dad's lap because you could sit in front of your dad and he could hold her. And they did the Matterhorn, and she laughed her head off through the entire ride. So then, of course, that's like a new thing. So, of course, then I take her. We end up at Universal Studios on different trips, and she's going over waterfalls in the Jurassic Park. She loved it. It was kind of like she didn't have the normal fear like what Dora had at her age.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I don't know if it's because she couldn't do that kind of, any kind of crazy movement on her own. And she loved the feeling of it because she was held in tight by us because
Right.
you had to really support her chest, make sure her head's supported because she couldn't sit independently at all. So she'd be totally safe, and she loved the feeling of those wild rides. So it became a really,
I love that. That's so great.
it was amazing.
That is so great.
And plus, particularly Disneyland, Universal, not as much, but Disneyland is like huge-hearted towards kids with disabilities.
Yeah.
You have a special pass, like you go in the no-line line.
Yeah.
The characters all come up to you. So they go straight up to Louisa, and I'd say to Dora, no, they're doing this because that's the way they've been trained for kids that have disabilities. I didn't want her to get jealous, but it was great because
honey, they don't love Louisa way more than you, but
so I mean, so those were incredible trips because those people were just so giving. And those people, that's how they're, those characters are trained, I'm sure. If you see a kid in a wheelchair, make an effort, and boy, do they. And I mean, those trips were just amazing. Yeah.
Sounds like it. It sounds like it. So how old was she when she started at that school then?
She was turning 6, and she was turning 6. Dora was turning 4 that October because they were both born in October.
Uh-huh.
And that was the year 2000.
Beautiful.
So,
that's amazing. That's amazing.
We were very lucky that we could do that kind of a just boom, we're going to leave.
Right. And she was in that school then for the rest of her life?
No, their bridge, they want to be a bridge
Oh, sure. Okay.
as opposed to a forever placement. So their whole mission was get your child so that they can either use a communication device or figure out how they're going to communicate and learn some tools, and then hopefully we'll go back into their home district school.
Okay. To bridge them to the public school. Okay.
And some people were ready to go, and other people are like, we don't ever want to leave.
Right.
But Louisa was there 4 years, and then we had the talk and thought, okay, if they're ready, we got to go. And we had this adorable little public school very near to our house. So she was there 2 years. They made an effort. She was in a special classroom with other kids. She had an aide because she, had to have an aide with her.
Yeah.
And it really just, it wasn't really working out because all sorts of things.
Yeah.
They were great, but it just wasn't going to be the best placement ultimately. And meanwhile, these other incredible parents said, bridge school doesn't last long enough. We need a placement where kids can stay until kids with very severe special needs can stay in a school setting until they're 22.
Uh-huh.
So that was their goal. And they created this extraordinary school called the Avalon Academy in Burlingame, California. It was created with this master teacher from Hungary. They have a method in Hungary that was started, let's say, in the mid-40s. It's called the Peto Institute. There's a lot of movement that is done with the kids. There's a lot of music. There's a lot of movement. Your kid's not in a wheelchair all day. That got up and running. And so when it was time to leave the public school, she went to Avalon.
You had a place to go. Yeah.
And it's an amazing, amazing place. Mm-hmm. So she was there roughly 4 years. Mm-hmm. She passed away when she was 16 and a half.
So let's talk about her medical health a little bit because, I know it did deteriorate kind of over time, and she started having, at the beginning, she was doing pretty great overall. And you talked about not being on medications and things like that. But then she did start to have more struggles later on, right? Yeah. So why don't you go into that a little bit?
Well, the kids that are very physically disabled, as you know, and are in wheelchairs and they can't sit independently, they don't have their own trunk support, you will get to realize, everything is out of whack in terms of muscle tone. There's weak swallowing. And a lot of these kids, what happens is they start to have micro aspirations. So liquid that should be going into their esophagus is going into their trachea. And they start to get pneumonias. Mm-hmm. And that's what started happening with Lueza. I mean, when I think back, she had a pneumonia even in New York when she was maybe 3 or 4. So that's what started happening. She had a high fever one night to the point where we thought, okay, this is something terrible. I mean, not terrible. We didn't think it was that bad, but it was bad enough that we drove her just to a little local emergency room in San Mateo. I assumed they'd say, we're going to put her on antibiotics. And he did the blood tests and he came back into the room, the emergency doctor, and said, she's very sick. We have to get her to the hospital right now. So we're going to have her taken to Lucille Packard Children's Hospital down at Stanford. You can follow in the car. And that's when I met this amazing doctor who was doing his pediatric residency. And I followed down the 280 into the hospital. And she had a very, very severe kind of aspiration pneumonia. Mm-hmm. And then, you have more testing done and you realize, okay, she cannot be
eating anymore. Mm-hmm.
Eating food by mouth because she was able to eat pureed food. Yeah. And so then you have that surgery done, which is a very simple surgery of getting a G-tube. So you have a little, it's almost like what you have on a beach ball, a little plastic thing that goes right into the...
We call it a button. It's not actually a button, but we call it a button. Yep.
Exactly. And you know what? Once you realize, all her friends have that, it's not that big a deal.
I know. It's so funny because every parent you talk to about getting the G-tube is always hates the idea of the G-tube. And then after you get the G-tube, it's why did we not do this 6 months ago? Because the G-tube is life-changing and really helpful. So
it's a huge, it was a huge relief. with everything, with her nutrition, with her hydration, medications, everything.
Right.
So, and then just bad things started happening. She's, her trachea started to get floppy. And we had near, catastrophes in the home where it would shut down. And she could have died any of those times. I don't know how we got through it and she didn't, but things happened like that. And she'd go back into the hospital. And then, it was a long hospitalization. They probably knew this kid's going to need a trach. But we had no familiarity with trachs. And that was a big thing, which was like, I don't have experience with this. It seems so terrible, so invasive. How do you deal with it? All those questions. Actually, the pulmonologist who first brought this up with me, Lueza loved him. I loved him. When we were all done with this, he said, would you write me an essay about your decision-making process of getting the trach?
Really?
So at a certain point, it was very clear that she was going to need the tracheotomy. And, so it was just going down these steps where I knew for years because I was reading a lot at that point where I was in reality for many years, which is, this is not going to go well. This is, and then, children in her class had died very suddenly with these kinds of same issues with aspiration pneumonia, where the child was in school one day and 3 days later, you're being told that child is going to probably be dying today. So this was our reality. And this is, where we were. And we just did our best. Yeah. But it was, now stuff.
Yeah, I do.
We were so lucky that we had the medical care that we had for her, that we had the people that we had helping us with her. I don't know how most people do this, right?
But you do. That's the thing. You don't know how you do it, but you do. And that's like us after losing our children too. We don't know how we go on, but you do.
And exactly. That's what you kind of want to, what you want to say to people, which is, they say, I don't know how you do it. You think you do the same.
I know. You think it's like something amazing. It's not. You got to get up every day and you just keep doing it and doing stuff. So she had several episodes of this aspiration pneumonia. And then do you want to talk about what happened at the end then?
I'm part of the group, the Compassionate Friends.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I'm in one of the little groups in probably through a Facebook group. And, you see this a lot, which is people writing about their terrible, terrible guilt that they have. And then they'll list all these things that they did or didn't do. And you think, well, of course, it's understandable. It's understandable to have that. My bad guilt is I worked on and off forever as an actor. Mm-hmm. I ended up doing like 2 years in this Broadway show, a year and a half in that Broadway show. And I worked a bit when I moved out here. I worked in this city at a wonderful theater called American Conservatory Theater. And then I ended up doing the show Wicked, which was, they had their own company for a while in the city in San Francisco. And they offered me, at some point I was offered to do one of their tours, which is these big, beautiful Broadway tours with, the highest level of work that you can do. And you think, well, how could she have gone on a tour? She had children. And so the tour was all in the West. Every 3 weeks or so, I would get to come home for 3 days. My husband worked from home. We had extra help, of course, with Lueza. And I thought, I can do that for 6 months. It'll be crazy, but I'll be home every few weeks.
Yeah.
The money is great. All the health insurance money, all of that stuff you put in your head. And I left, and I think it was 3 weeks later, she died in the middle of the night. And the story is this, which is she was not well on that Sunday. My husband was in touch with all the doctors. They said, don't bring her to the emergency room. She's too vulnerable. There are too many sick kids in there right now. You're going to see your pulmonologist Monday morning and the gastroenterologist Monday morning. Maybe she had sepsis. Oh, we don't know.
Yeah.
We went in the morning in her room and she was gone. And he called me up and I was about to get in my car to drive home, to be home for those 3 days. And that's the way it happened. And so I have guilt that I ever left the house. But, we make these decisions and then we have to live with them.
Well, and I think you're right. I think we all have it. And
Yeah.
we've talked about this with so many parents. I don't know of any parent who's had a child die who does not have some element of guilt. Okay?
Right. Like
I
I
mean,
could have done this. I could have made a different decision.
yes. I mean, we were rear-ended in a car accident and I was not even driving. Do I still feel guilty? 100% I do. 100%.
Right.
I can go through all these different things that I could have, should have done differently that may
Right.
have made us be in a little different spot on the
Right.
road. Should I
Right.
have noticed that car coming out of nowhere? I don't know. I don't remember. I don't even remember the accident. So I don't know. But do I feel guilt about it all the time? Yes. Is it reasonable? No.
Yeah.
But it's so much. I mean, I've said this so many times, and I'm just going to say it again because maybe somebody's listening for the first time. It is so much easier to feel guilt than to accept the fact that you're powerless.
Yep.
And that's what I just see again and again and again. If you have to accept you are powerless to prevent this, then that means that you're powerless to prevent other horrible things. And that's hard to grasp. So if you accept the guilt that I could have, should have done something differently and maybe this outcome wouldn't have happened, now you can protect yourself from other horrible things, thinking that you have more control than you did, right? Because would you have changed anything? No. You would have done everything exactly the same.
Right. Because if I had been home and the doctor said, don't bring her to the hospital.
You wouldn't have come in. You wouldn't have gone in.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just like to repeat that again. And I know I kind of beat people in the head with that, but I think it's important.
So important
I think
because
it's super important.
So I see it everywhere on our Facebook group. And you have to be very careful what you say. You just offer love and support. But part of you wants to just say, don't do that anymore. You
I
couldn't
know.
have done
But you
anything
have to kind of get past it yourself because other people telling you don't feel guilty, that does not help. That does not help you not feel guilty. You have to get there on your own to be able to accept that. So anyway, let's talk a little bit then about your grief journey and kind of what that's been like, because it's been a number of years now.
Long time.
Yeah.
14 years. 14 years.
Hard to even wrap your head around it. Mm-hmm.
My grief journey started in an odd way in that I was on a Broadway tour. Then I came home. My people I was working with, of course, said, just go, just do what you need to do. And so obviously I was then on a leave of absence.
Yeah.
I came home for 2 weeks. My younger daughter was finishing up 8th grade. And here's my second guilt thing. I should have stayed home for 6 months and then gone back to work because they hope I would have had my job whenever I went back. And at some point during those 2 weeks, my younger daughter said, Mommy, go back to work. You'll be happier, or something like that. I should have stayed home for those 6 months. And I didn't. I did go back to work. About 2 or 3 weeks later, my daughter and my husband drove me up to Eugene, Oregon, where the tour was at that point for a few weeks. And they stayed a few days and then drove home. So my beginning of this journey path was doing 8 shows a week. I had this incredible schedule that keeps you very grounded because you have to do it. You have to do that. You're part of this incredible show, this amazing music. One of my best friends was in the show just coincidentally. He got the same tour that I did. So I had emotional support if I needed it. And I kind of almost didn't feel anything a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah.
What I would do was I was drawn to, like, whatever city we would go to, I wanted to go into a church. And I'm not a religious person, but I was drawn to, I need to go to a church, and probably it's going to have to be Catholic or high Episcopalian, because I need to light candles. I need to feel something. And but other than that, I felt kind of numb a lot of the time. I couldn't sleep. I'd have to take benzodiazepines to sleep at like 2 in the morning because I could not do that. I felt physically strange, like something might have been wrong with my brain. And then I'd remember, oh, your child died. You're going to have
Yeah.
strange symptoms.
Yeah.
Um, but the theater having that schedule, and then, traveling, because then you go to your next city, and then you go to your next city, and then my daughter would come up with my husband, and so that was my first, I don't know, chunk of that year.
Yeah.
And then, I took a big chunk of time off a few months later because my daughter was going to go back east for her high school for what she made that decision. And so then I extended my time into the tour because she wouldn't even be at home. Then there was the next part, which was moving back home. And she was out of the house because she was in school back east. My husband was out of the house because we were, kind of separated at that point. It was a long, complicated marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It's very strange,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
seek out things, like, I didn't wanna go to a counselor for grief,
Yeah.
but I was my own I joke, I was my own grief counselor. I would find a Zen Buddhist, not a Zen Buddhist either. I'd find a Zen Buddhist ceremony called the Jizo ceremony, which was for people whose children had died, and I drove up to Marin County and participate in this absolutely beautiful ceremony for people like us. I would seek out things like that, and then the writing was a huge
Yeah.
writing, and then, like, arts and crafts. I would make collages with Louisa. I would find photographs. I would put them on wood. I would find some writing. I'd put writing there. And then I would work on this little book, which took me basically 2 decades to finish because I would quit for years at a time. I had no confidence about it.
Uh-huh.
So it went on for years. Um,
Well, and people may be able to guess this, but I think you should tell people the name of your book.
My book ended up had a couple of titles in my head, one of which was Screaming into Towels. But then I realized a more appropriate title for it would be She May Be Lying Down, but She May Be Very Happy.
Yeah.
And I liked the length of the title, and I liked what it was, which was, this is how our life turned out.
Right.
She could only lie down. She couldn't roll. She couldn't sit. She couldn't do any of those physical things. And she was a very, very joyful, joyful child. And we were so, so lucky in so many ways with everything.
So that was a part of your healing, you said. The question that I wanted to ask you earlier that I didn't, that I'm going to ask now, is that I know when you've got these kids, like, I'm speaking from the doctor side now. You've got these kids that come in all the time, that you see them all the time. You develop relationships with families.
Mhm.
They develop relationships with you, with nurses, with all these doctors. And then when the child dies, it's done.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason for you to ever go back to the children's hospital and to see those residents and to see those nurses and to see those doctors again. And I've spoken to other parents, and it's a big loss because they were a big part of your life, actually.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? So I just want you to speak to that a little bit.
That's so interesting when you just said that. Okay, first of all, Lucille Packard Children's Hospital does this extraordinary thing. I don't know when it started. I've gone to maybe 3 or 4. Once a year in October, they have a service of remembrance
I love that.
for all the children that went through their hospital and either, I don't know, died at the hospital, died wherever, but children, it's so beautiful. You don't see your doctors there, but they do this beautiful ceremony where there's a choir that I think is composed of, I don't know if they're some doctors, some nurses. People bring photographs. They have a speaker. One of the parents is a speaker. If you want, you've sent your picture in through their email. At a certain point, they will show all the photographs with the names.
And it's not
all
just the
children.
ones who have died the last year, right? It's just
Nope.
in general,
Nope.
right? Okay, that's what I thought.
No. Yeah.
Because some, including I think our local one, will do something that for the first year, but I don't think that's enough. Because I know, so I am pretty involved. It's funny because obviously I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but I know a lot of people now at Sick Kids Children's Hospital in Toronto, in Ontario. And I know their bereavement coordinator, who's great, and I've met her, and I've been to Sick Kids Hospital. And they do something at Christmas time every year to celebrate the kids. And she has asked me if I want Andy involved. And I just think that's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Andy was never, well, he went to Canada fishing with his grandpa and his dad, his brother, but he's never been to Toronto. He didn't have any affiliation with Sick Kids Children's Hospital, but it was so special that they are willing to open that up because there is no place for Andy to be remembered. And the other thing with Andy didn't die in a hospital. Andy died on the side of a road. So when your child dies on the side of the road, you don't get any of that. The hospital stuff. No one sends you something in a year to remember your child, even one time when they died on the side of the road, right? Yeah. So I love that, different organizations and different people trying to be so inclusive, to include all of us that may have fallen through the cracks, and then in your case, I love too that they're doing this every year. That just makes my heart so happy.
I know.
Because it's not a one and done thing. It's not like we're going to remember once and then, And
she didn't die at the hospital. She died at home in her bed.
No, and she didn't die at the hospital either.
No. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, I love that. I love that they're doing that.
When you said that, I was just thinking, now, granted, most of those doctors are all out somewhere else.
Yeah.
But some of them are there. I know that because you'd have this feeling. And that's partly like, for me to have this book actually published by a publisher that never knew me, that was recommended by a famous writer. I mean, the fact that I even got to this publisher is unbelievable. One of my things about finishing it was like, I want to thank these people. I want to thank these people publicly in my own little way. And so, I mean, the idea that you could ever see any of them again and just to say thank you, because now not everybody has my experience. I have a friend who hated the hospital, hated the doctors. I don't know what that was. I don't know. But for me and us, it was extreme gratitude. And there's this feeling of wanting to just make sure they know how much we appreciated them. And we knew that they were fighting for Lueza. And that was probably partly why I loved being at the hospital, was this feeling of safety. Like, okay, she'll be okay here. Mm-hmm. But also just that care where I describe in the book at some point where, in the middle of the night, all the nurses are out at the nurses' station, quietly drinking tea and writing their reports. You just were in this safe feeling. And then during the day, there'd be a man playing the guitar in the hallway. It's a beautiful, beautiful hospital, that Lucille Packard.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love too, and I'm sure you would probably agree with me, that even if the only person that you touched for this book was from that one doctor in Bend, Oregon, or wherever it was in Oregon, I don't know.
Yep, Bend, Oregon.
Yep. Then that would be enough for you, right?
That's how I feel.
Can tell you, I mean, I didn't obviously read that letter from him, but I can tell you from Like, if I ever got, somebody said in a book that would mean a lot to me. So I'm sure that meant so much to him and was amazing for him. So
Yeah.
I love that you were able to do that.
It's, yeah, for me, it was, I just was almost in shock how quietly joyful I felt. Like everything's, I don't need to do anything anymore in my life. This has happened because for years I would think about that doctor and just think,
Mm-hmm.
you just had a sense of the certain of these people. And plus, let's face it, who goes into pediatrics? The nicest doctors, right?
I
I
know.
mean, because
I say
you
that
want,
all the time. Like, you're not going to make it in pediatrics if you're not nice. You're just not.
because that's why are you drawn? You know, you're going to be working with children. It's not going to be easy, and you're going to have
No.
to deal with their families. You know, I mean, all of that stuff. So yes, you get these amazing, amazing people.
Any other parting words that you wanted to say before I let you go today?
I just enjoyed talking with you so much, and then of course,
Good.
knowing that you're a pediatrician just didn't freak me out, but it made me, oh,
Well, I'm glad. It probably was good that you didn't know ahead of time. Maybe, I don't know. I felt like
I'm glad I didn't know. It was just such a happy surprise
kind of threw it on you there in the middle, but that was good.
to
That
hear
was
your
good.
perspectives about some of these things. Was just so moving. And
Good. Well, thank you again
thank you.
for sharing, Lueza. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can type Andy's Mom, one word, to the number 53555. This provides a link to GiveButter, which allows donations through PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, or credit cards. GiveButter will provide a receipt of your tax-deductible donation, or you can visit the donation page at andysmom.com/donate. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 and can receive donations through Thrivent Financial and Benevity. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com or on the Instagram or Facebook Always Andy's Mom accounts. Sign up for the email list to get weekly episode links as well as pictures of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.